It was the second Tuesday of April when I noticed she didn't pour me a glass of wine. Small thing, stupid thing, but it sat in my throat for the rest of the night like a swallowed stone. Everyone else had theirs rose, chilled, poured with the practiced flair of someone who's hosted enough feminist book clubs to know which bottle means fun and which means serious discourse. Nina always knew. She always performed it well. That night was no exception. There were 6 of us. 7, if you count the intern from her nonprofit who tagged along and offered to take group photos candidly. Nina passed the bottle around like a torch, first to Talia, then Danny, then Priya, even Megan who hadn't read the book. And then she set it down. Right in front of me. Uncorked. Still half full. She smiled and turned to Priya, already diving into some quote from Audre Lorde about anger and justice. The room murmured in agreement. I stared at the condensation on the glass bottle, the sweat of it beading like my own skin. I told myself I was being paranoid. That she'd simply forgotten. That I could reach out and pour it myself. But I didn't. I waited. I waited the whole night. Did you want some? Talia finally asked as we were clearing plates, her voice so casual it almost didn't register. Her hand hovered near the bottle like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to touch it. I laughed too quickly and said no, I was good. She blinked like she almost believed me. The next morning, Nina posted a photo on Instagram. The whole group on her balcony, the city behind us blurred into gold. Her caption read, "Women who pour into each other #sisterhood #radical softness." I wasn't tagged. I stared at it for a long time. Not angry exactly. Just hollowed. It wasn't the wine. It was the choreography. The way she smiled as she skipped me, the slight lean of her body toward Priya, the way Megan's glass was filled even though she hadn't read the book. Something had shifted. Or maybe something had been shifting for a while and I'd only just noticed. A week earlier, Nina had commented on a tweet I posted, something about callouts becoming currency in activist spaces. She replied, "Accountability isn't harm, sweetie." 48 likes. I'd met her after, soft, joking. Didn't know we were subtweeting each other in public now. She left it unseen. Not a word. Not even a heart. I used to write essays about women supporting women. Now I was wondering if any of us really meant it. The Thursday after the wine, Nina hosted a panel on feminist labor and emotional burnout. I went. Of course I went. Not out of loyalty, those days were fraying, but because I still believed that showing up mattered. That being present meant something. Even if it didn't anymore. She saw me walk in. I know she did. Her eyes flicked up, paused, then returned to whatever anecdote she was telling about workplace boundaries and communal care. The room was packed, folding chairs in uneven rows, tote bags slumped under seats, the air thick with lavender oil and surface-level connection. I sat in the second row, next to a woman I half knew from a Slack channel about non-linear healing. She offered me a kind bar from her bag, and I took it even though I wasn't hungry. Unwrapping it gave my hands something to do. Nina was good. I'd forgotten how good. Her voice, low and deliberate, curled around phrases like reciprocal vulnerability and the myth of the strong black woman. The audience nodded like metronomes. I used to be one of them. I used to nod hardest. During Q&A, someone asked how to handle being excluded by other women in spaces that claim to be inclusive. Nina tilted her head. Her fingers pressed together in a cathedral shape. "That's a really important question," she said. "Sometimes, when we feel excluded, it's not about being shut out, it's about being centered when we're not supposed to be." The girl who asked the question nodded, but her face fell a little. I recognized that fall. It's what happens when you ask for help and get a theory. Afterward, I lingered by the tea station, pretending to choose between peppermint and rooibos. Nina floated between groups like a host at a wedding. Her back was straight, her hand gestures crisp. People reached for her like she was the answer. When she passed me, our shoulders brushed. "Hey," I said, low. She turned, paused. "Hey." That was it. Not, "How are you?" Not, "Good to see you." Just that single, hollow syllable. Then she turned back to a woman in a mock-neck top who was talking about fundraising strategy. I watched her place a hand lightly on the woman's arm. Familiar, effortless. I stood there holding peppermint I didn't want. My jaw tightened. Not from anger, something quieter. Shame, maybe. Embarrassment. This was a person I once shared passwords with. Crying voicemails. Half drafts of essays we never published. Now I was just background. Scenery. That night, she posted a story from the event. You could see the back of my head in one frame, cropped, unfocused. The caption read, "So grateful for tonight's energy. We hold each other. We keep each other." I didn't repost it. I watched it expire. Just like everything else. I used to write with her. Not just alongside her, not just in shared Google Docs. We wrote into each other. Her edits were sharp but generous, the kind that made you believe in your own sentences again. She once added a comma to a paragraph I'd given up on, and suddenly it had breath. There's a document still sitting in my drive called Feminist Burnout, Notes Toward Survival. It has both our names on it. I haven't opened it in months. But I remember the last line she added, "Healing doesn't always include everyone." At the time, I thought it was profound. Now I wonder if it was a warning. I've started writing a new piece, but I keep deleting the first paragraph. Everything feels too bitter or too vague. Too much like I'm trying to win an argument no one knows we're having. This morning I opened my phone and saw she'd tweeted, "Just because someone was in the room when you were hurting doesn't mean they held space for you." 37 retweets. I didn't know who it was about. I didn't know if I was supposed to. I drafted a reply, "Are we doing this again?" Then deleted it. Instead, I sent her a voice note. 17 seconds long. "Hey, I'm not even sure what to say at this point, but I guess I just miss. I don't know when we could talk without needing to perform the right kind of hurt." I'm probably overthinking, but I wanted to say something before I didn't. I didn't press send. I watched the little blue circle pulse and then tapped discard. My hand lingered above the phone, like I expected it to do something more. Later, in the group chat, the bigger one, the one we used to co-run but now mostly just watch from opposite ends, someone dropped a link to an article Nina had just published, "When Care Becomes Control, Unpacking Care Imbalance Among Women." The group buzzed with praise. Fire emojis. Clapping hands. That one from Danny that always stings a little, queen shit. I typed clapping hands, clapping hands, clapping hands, and hit send. Then I muted the thread for 8 hours. The last message she ever sent me directly is still pinned in our DM history. "We don't have to agree to hold each other accountable. I love you. Don't forget that." She never unpinned it. Neither did I. That's the thing about emotional wreckage. Sometimes the debris is sacred. 2 weeks later, she invited me to coffee. Sort of. It came through a comment on a mutual's Instagram post, a blurry pic of someone's book launch, both of us tagged, neither of us in the frame. Nina commented, "Would love to catch up sometime soon, DM me?" I stared at it for a full minute. The way someone does when they're deciding if a mirror is lying to them. I didn't DM her. Not right away. Instead, I combed through old photos of us. There's one from a retreat 2 summers ago. She's sitting cross-legged on a blanket, talking with her hands, and I'm laughing at something she said, not to me, but toward me. We look like trust. Eventually, I replied under the post, "Sure, let me know what works." 2 days passed. Then the message came, "Weds at 10 a.m. Bluestone? Just us. I think we should clear the air." The phrasing rattled in my chest. Clear the air. Like the tension was fog and not a pattern. Like it wasn't layered in tone, in choices, in digital dust. Still, I went. Bluestone Lane was already half full when I arrived. Freelancers and soft-lit influencers. The usual ambient hum of productivity. She was sitting near the window, reading something on her phone, one leg tucked under her. A lavender latte in front of her untouched. I stood there a moment, watching her without being seen. There was a time she'd have looked up instinctively, felt me coming. Now I had to make myself known. "Hey," I said. She looked up, and for a second, her face softened. Not affection. Recognition. Like finding something you forgot you still owned. "Hey," she echoed. "Thanks for coming." I sat. She offered to get me something, and I said no, though my stomach betrayed me with a low growl. She nodded like she expected that. Like she knew I'd come empty-handed and hollowed. So she began, palms flat on the table. I think we both know things have been off. I didn't answer. Let the silence stretch. Let her feel the air that needed clearing. I've felt. I don't know, judged, she said. Like, everything I say is being read through this lens of harm. I almost laughed. Instead, I traced the grain of the wooden table with one finger. And I felt erased, I said quietly. Or maybe rewritten. Her eyes flicked to mine, and something there tightened. This isn't easy for me either, she said, voice low. I've had to unlearn a lot. I'm not trying to be the center. But I also can't shrink every time someone feels displaced. I nodded slowly, unsure if I agreed or just wanted her to stop talking. Outside, someone dropped a coffee lid and cursed softly. When I looked back at her, she was staring at me like she expected something more. But I had nothing clean to offer. Only questions I no longer trusted her to hold. So I said the simplest, most dishonest thing, I get it. She exhaled, long and shaky, like that was all she needed. We didn't hug when we left. She touched my arm briefly, then turned back toward the train. I stood there a while after, unsure what we'd cleared, if anything at all. 3 days after the coffee, she posted a meme to her story. A pastel background with serif font, like the kind you'd find printed on a canvas in a white woman's wellness studio. It read, "Some people confuse boundaries with betrayal. That's their work to do." No tag, no caption, just vibes. But it landed like a slap. I stared at it on my cracked screen for too long, the letters blurring, my reflection ghosted behind the text. I didn't know if it was about me. That's what made it worse. That it could have been about anyone or everyone. The plausible deniability felt weaponized. I screenshotted it anyway. Sent it to Danny in a private message, just LOL. She replied with a single emoji, the zipped mouth. That hurt more than I expected. Danny used to call me every week. Used to send me poems and selfies and little voice notes where her cat meowed in the background. Now she sent silence. Now she sent emojis. I typed, "Is it weird that I feel like that was aimed at me?" Watched the typing bubble appear, disappear, reappear. Then, "I don't want to be in the middle." Middle of what? There hadn't even been a fight. Just a slow, bloodless undoing. But I knew what she meant. The space between two women who used to be mirrors, now reduced to opaque gestures and shared group chats. I replied, "You're not. It's fine." Lie number 9. That afternoon, I opened our old shared Google Drive again. The feminist burnout doc was still there, untouched. But the view history showed Nina had opened it the day before our coffee. I imagined her rereading my words. Our words. Parsing through them not as collaboration, but as evidence. Looking for what went wrong. Or worse, looking for justification. There's a sentence I wrote in the opening paragraph. When women stop trusting each other, it doesn't look like war, it looks like absence. I copied it into a new doc. Just that one line. Sat with it. Let it sting. Then I posted it to my close friend's story on Instagram. Black background. White text. No context. Nina didn't view it. But Danny did. It used to be called Witch Coven 2.0, a joke, kind of. We all read Caliban and the Witch one summer and got high off the language of collective rage. Back then, the group chat pulsed like a heartbeat. Links, memes, half-written captions, voice notes in the dark. Now it was quieter. Less coven, more curated. The day after the meme post, Megan changed the name to just Book Club Books Growing Heart. No one acknowledged it. No one had to. The pink heart said enough. I noticed Priya had added a new member, someone I didn't recognize, a mutual of Nina's who posted a lot of infographics about feminine rewilding and wore large hats indoors. She introduced herself with a long message about being excited to be in community with soft, strong femmes. I left it on read. Later that night, they started planning the next meeting. A new book, something about boundaries and embodiment. Talia dropped a poll for dates. I voted, though no one replied to my comment. Just a floating thumbs up. When the calendar invite came through, I saw it had been moved to Megan's apartment. Nina used to host everything. I hovered over the RSVP. Clicked maybe. And then I did something I hadn't done in years. I searched my own name in the chat. Not out of paranoia, more like archaeology. A dig site. Looking for proof I'd once belonged. There were old threads, photos I'd sent from a protest, jokes about someone's ex, long voice notes where my laugh trailed off into breath. And then, slowly, it thinned. My name appearing less. My comments going unanswered. My links left unclicked. I didn't find betrayal. Just erosion. At the very bottom was a message from Nina, timestamped 5 months ago. Can we hold space for her but also be honest about the patterns? I'm tired of overly cautious communication. No one replied. Not in text, at least. I stared at that message until the words lost shape. Patterns. Space. Tiptoeing. I didn't know what she meant, but I knew how it felt. Like the floor had been pulled out under me in slow motion. I didn't say anything in the chat that day. But I did leave the poll. And I turned off notifications. Not out of anger. Not even out of grief. Just to stop hearing the sound of a door I wasn't sure had ever been open. She emailed me. Not DMed. Not texted. An email. Subject line, naming what was. I read it in the grocery store parking lot, half distracted, thumb smudged with clementine juice from one of those peel-and-eat packs I always regret buying. The sun was too bright on the screen, but I didn't wait to get home. I opened it right there, door still half open, NPR still murmuring from the car. It began like this. I've been thinking a lot about what used to feel easy between us and how heavy it's gotten. I want to name my part in that, even if I'm still figuring out how to say it right. That was the first sentence. And I'll admit, my breath caught a little. Hope flickered. Just for a second. But then it kept going. Sometimes I felt like I was being used as a mirror for your insecurities, and it made me feel like I had to shrink in order to be safe around you. I read that part twice. A familiar heat crept up the back of my neck, the kind that doesn't know if it's guilt or defensiveness. I'm not saying you're harmful. I'm just saying I don't feel safe. That line gutted me. Not because I couldn't imagine having made her feel that way, but because of how final it sounded. How clean. She talked about boundaries, about patterns, about care fatigue, about how we'd confused intimacy with accountability. She said she still loved me in a broad, ancestral way. I didn't know what that meant. Near the end, she wrote, "This isn't a door closing. It's a window opening with a screen between us." I closed the email and sat there for a long time, the sun pressing into my thighs through the windshield. I hadn't moved, hadn't opened the car door all the way. A window with a screen. It sounded poetic until I realized what it meant. She still wanted to see me, just not feel me. She wanted distance, without disappearance. A connection she could control. That night I didn't respond. But I opened my journal and wrote the one sentence I kept circling back to. What if I wasn't emotionally distant, just inconvenient? The next morning, I drafted a reply. I didn't send it. Instead, I printed her email out, folded it into eighths, and slid it into the book we never finished writing. A bookmark in a story that no longer belonged to both of us. I didn't unfollow her. I just muted her stories, then her posts, then finally her name in the group chat. One setting at a time, like dimming the lights before leaving a room. Still, the algorithm kept nudging her toward me. Tagged posts. Comments she left under other women's selfies, always affirming, always articulate. She knew how to look like care. One night, I found myself scrolling through her profile in the dark, wrapped in the blue light of my phone and my own irrational ache. I wasn't looking for anything in particular. Just evidence. Proof I had ever mattered. And then I saw it. A carousel post she'd shared from a recent retreat. 6 slides, all carefully edited. Women in flowy linen, meditating under trees, scribbling in notebooks on sun-warmed decks. Slide 4 was a group photo. She was at the center. Of course. But what caught me was who else was there. Megan, Danny, Priya. Even Talia, who once cried in my kitchen after a bad breakup and swore, "You're the only one who actually listens." Now they were all smiling in a soft pile around Nina like petals arranged around a bloom. The caption read, "Reweaving trust, one honest breath at a time." This is what repair can look like. I stared at it for longer than I should have. That familiar tightness gathered in my chest, the kind that doesn't ask permission before showing up. Not rage. Not even grief. Just the sharp realization that repair had happened, without me. I opened Danny's profile. Then Priya's. One by one. They had all unfollowed me. Quietly. No message. No goodbye. Just the digital equivalent of looking away when someone waves. I checked our DMs. Still there. Threads full of old affirmations, shared playlists, links to radical essays and tarot spreads. None of it deleted. Just stopped. Like a phone left off the hook, a voice still echoing on the other end. It wasn't until hours later, after the spiral, after the shame, after the failed attempts to cry, that I realized something. I had taught them how to do this. How to curate boundaries. How to claim discomfort as clarity. How to leave, cleanly, with an Instagram caption and a meme about healing. I just didn't think they'd use it on me. And I didn't know if I blamed them. Which somehow made it worse. They asked me to speak. Not Nina. Someone from the university's gender studies department. An adjunct I barely knew, who used to repost my Medium essays back when I still wrote them without flinching. She said the panel was about feminist friendship in the digital age. I stared at the email for hours before replying, finally typing, "Thanks, but I think I'm still figuring out how to speak about that without performing it." She replied with kindness. Said I was welcome anytime. Said she understood. I didn't believe her. But I appreciated the softness. Still, I couldn't stop imagining it. The panel. The rows of young women, open notebooks, the glint of water bottles on foldable desks. I pictured Nina there. Not as a speaker, she wasn't on the flyer, but as a presence. A silent citation in every sentence. I imagined someone quoting her essay about when care becomes control. I imagined nodding. I imagined clapping. I imagined how it might feel to be asked a question I once would have answered in paragraphs, but now could only respond to with breath. Instead, I went for a walk during the panel. 2 hours, no headphones. Just the sound of my own body moving past all the places I used to feel certain in. There's a little park near my apartment where the swings still creak like they're asking questions. I sat there for a while, shoes tracing circles in the mulch. A little girl ran past, her mom trailing behind, distracted by her phone. I watched them go. Not wistfully. Just observantly. My phone buzzed. A message from someone I hadn't spoken to in months, Jules, a former coworker who left the nonprofit world before the rest of us admitted it was unsustainable. She wrote, "Saw your name mentioned at the panel today. Made me think of you. Hope you're okay. Miss your writing." Just that. No performance. No caveats. No emojis. I didn't reply right away. I just sat there, holding the phone in both hands like it might warm me. There was a time when I would have screenshotted it and sent it to Nina, captioned, "Still got it, relieved face." Now I just reread it quietly. And let it fill a space that had been empty for too long. A month passed. No more memes. No more half-visible stories or tagged posts or group chats I pretended not to check. Just a slow, dull fade, like color draining from fabric that had once been bright from overuse. I wrote a new piece. Not an essay. Not something to pitch. Just a quiet thing, a long-form side dressed in prose. I titled it After the Sisterhood and didn't tell anyone I was writing it. It wasn't about Nina, exactly. It was about the gap that opens when shared language turns into sharp edges. About how accountability can become performance. About the ache of watching your name dissolve from rooms you helped build. In one paragraph, I wrote, "There are wounds you can't name without sounding like a villain. The bruise of being left out. The ache of a laugh that's no longer sent to you first. The kind of grief that feels too small to mourn publicly and too large to carry alone." I saved it in a folder labeled Unsent, right next to screenshots. Voice notes. That last, folded email. I almost sent it to her. Almost. But instead, I did something quieter. I logged out of the shared drive. Finally. No announcement, no message. Just left. Later that week, I saw she had updated the doc title from Feminist Burnout, Notes Toward Survival, to Feminist Burnout, A Living Archive. I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel much at all. Just a soft release, like tension leaving the shoulders after days of being clenched without realizing. I went back to the swing set that weekend. Same park. Same rusted chains. I sat with a coffee and a small notebook, one I hadn't used since the early days of the book club, back when we believed so deeply in each other's language. On the last page, I wrote one sentence. Sometimes we confuse repair with return. I closed the notebook. And this time, I didn't wait for her to see it. I didn't need to be witnessed to be real.